Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to the worldwide subscriber Dogman submission. Before we get into today's upload, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters of Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first worldwide Dogman subscriber submission. Hello Jeff, new sub here. I stumbled onto your channel doing some searches on Dogman. Great stuff, really enjoying the encounters. I had an encounter of my own. I was really young, like 4, so the details have always been hard to get straight into my mind. It's kind of a long story, and I recently got the courage to bring it up to my older brother and my dad. My older brother, who was 6, completely confirmed it. My dad had a slightly different take, but both confirmed something very weird did happen. So here it goes. I grew up in Canterbury, Belmore, New South Wales, just west of Sydney in the early 80s. Suburban family homes everywhere. No forest close, but everyone had a really big backyard. My dad, being a carpenter, had built this tree house about 25 feet up in this old camphor laurel tree. He's a great dad. So my brother and I were always outside every afternoon playing all sorts of games and just having fun together. It was the 80s, so it wasn't unusual for us kids to be out by ourselves until the streetlights came on. The house had a big gully, that's what we called it. It ran along the back of the property. We had a 6-foot hardwood fence all around, so we were pretty safe. The gully was the old milk run, and basically where they used to clean people's bedpans, etc. from back in the day. It was overgrown with weeds and was mostly a swale drain. About 8 feet wide, and on the other side was the backyard to our rear neighbor. We used to run down it and go to other friends' houses up and down. Some had gates to go through, and others we had to get some cinder blocks so we could climb over the fence. We'd see dead chickens and cats and dogs all the time, ripped up and not completely consumed, but it was fairly regular to see. And we paid no mind to it, really. Maybe poked them with a stick every now and then. They most likely looked like they had been killed, not really eaten. Being Australian, we are aware that the snake and spiders sometimes things just get killed, picking a fight with something that's far more dangerous, if not as big. I was fairly young, so I wouldn't go down the gully unless my older brother was with me. I just never really felt comfortable by myself, and sometimes the older kids would make fun of me or try to run off to scare me more. That's a bit of the backstory, so here's our encounter. I had just finished school and my brother and I were walking home around 3:30 p.m. on a November summer in Sydney. It was about a mile, got a snack and headed out to the backyard. We had an Irish setter called Tralfez, and he loved to play catch, so I was throwing the ball with him and my older brother was in the treehouse. The treehouse was dead center of the yard and was an awesome lookout point. You could see clear into all neighbors' places and across the street out front. So I'm throwing the ball and I throw it to the backyard and it rolls up to the back left corner of the yard where Dad had pulled down the old outhouse made of sheet metal all rusted up. We kind of stayed away because snakes love getting under it because it holds the heat of the summer. Anyway, I ran up there to get the ball for Trowel, who couldn't get under it without the metal cutting his snout. But I decided to jump on the metal first to scare away any snakes. And that's when I saw it. I think I scared it with the loud metal sound, but the huge head, like wolf, stood up over the top of the fence. Now the fence was 6 feet. and it cleared it by a good foot or more. It did not make a sound, just looked at me with these huge amber-colored eyes, the size of a man's fist to give a perspective of how big this thing was. Instant fear gripped me, a fear that froze me, but I was a pretty brave kid, and it's like I instantly knew the fear was not really my own, but somehow this thing was trying to make me feel more fearful. Somehow, if that makes any sense. It was maybe looking at me for 3 seconds or so, which felt like a long time. I called out to my brother, Jake. Nothing came out of my mouth, so I tried again, never looking away. This time, I got a whisper and slowly got louder, Jake. He immediately started yelling for Dad. As soon as Jake called out to Dad, the dogman dropped eyed contact with me and dropped below the fence line. I immediately felt better, jumping up the fence to look down the gully to see this dogman running. It was already 60 to 70 yards up the gully. Dad came out, thought it was some older kids who had been having some water bomb wars with. Now, that's just the start, because here is where the real paranormal stuff started. About 2 days after the encounter one night, at like 3 in the morning, I woke up to heavy breathing. It was just like Darth Vader from Star Wars. Obviously, I was scared of it as a kid. Mechanical breathing and footsteps. Deep, deliberate steps. Not too loud, but you could hear someone slowly walking down the hallway. My older brother and I share a bedroom and had bunk beds. He had the top and I had the bottom bunk, of course, being the younger brother. Immediately, I was gripped with fear. I couldn't even say Jake's name. I knew it was the wolf, which is what I had named it. It walks into the open doorway to our bedroom, just a black shadow, not resembling anything, but just a shadow in an outline of a 7-foot man thing. And I threw the covers over my head immediately. I was so scared. It came closer and seemed to try and get my brother. First I heard him stir, but he rolled over. He would later tell me that he was fully aware it was there, but chose to ignore it, which seemed to work because it lowered its head and came right up close to me. I could feel its breath on the sheet over my head. It stayed like that the entire night until light came. I was exhausted once it finally left, and I jumped up and cuddled him with my mom and dad in their bed. This would go on for years. I learned not to pull the covers over my head, and it would just stay in the doorway. I would close the door when we went to bed only to wake up and find it open. Dad or Mom would open it just so they could keep an ear on me and my brother. It became a thing where I wouldn't sleep unless my dad was there with me. I'd wake up and hear the breathing and make Dad come and stay in my room with us. We would move house a lot. My parents got divorced. This thing would go away. I'd have years where it wouldn't happen, only for it to find me again and start. When I was 13, we moved hours away from Sydney, and it stopped for 3 years. The last time it happened, I was 16, a lot older and bigger. I heard the breathing start and the footsteps and decided I'm going to face this thing. I'm scared of it, but I can put up a fight now. It fled. I stayed up all night outside the house just to show it I was not going to be an easy target anymore. I've never seen it since. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for the channel and the encounters. I wrote this on my phone, so hopefully there are not too many spelling mistakes. Peace and friendship, E. Today's second worldwide Dogman subscriber submission. This is my encounter, and to this day I can still see the creature in my mind. Jeff, I live in the United Kingdom. I was staying at my grandparents' one night back in 2009, July. In those days, they lived in a bungalow just off of Anlaby Road. It was 1 in the morning and I was sleeping in the front room. I was reading a book. What's ironic is it was a horror novel called Lord Loss. I was just about to switch the light off when all of a sudden my head swung around, and that's when I saw it. Walking past the window was a shadow of a figure. What was strange was it had the head of a wolf and the body of a human. The hands were not normal. They were claws, and they curled around at about 30 centimeters long. I was terrified. I didn't know what it was. It walked without looking in. What was strange about this is its head was barely visible from the window. It was only many years after attending a UFO conference and on the way home listening to Dogman Encounters did the penny drop as to what this creature was. Since that point, I started researching the Dogman, and this year I set up my own YouTube channel, Expedition Dogman, in order to share what I have learned. This leads me on to a second story in July, just gone. Me and my friend went out to the Bromston Drain to track down Old Stinker, the beast of Bromston Drain. So, when we got there, we played some Dogman howls to try to get the creature out. Unfortunately, we couldn't, but we did find a footprint and a den. As we were shooting footage for the den, we heard a growl. In the field opposite of the drain was horses. They got spooked and tried to block off the nearby bridge. It was only a couple weeks later I sent the footage to a friend in America. When he sent it back, you could clearly see it hiding in the trees. This is my tale, and to those of you listening, these creatures are very much real. Please be careful if you do see a Dogman. Today's third worldwide subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, how are you? Most of the world does not know that there is more than one race in Japan. The modern Japanese that we are familiar with in the United States, we call Yayo. My ancestors are called Joman. We look different than the Yayo in a way that we are taller with longer arms, leg length to height ratio, and our eyes are different in that we have a fold in our lid. High cheekbones, square jawlines. We are the indigenous people of Japan. The Yayo, which are the dominant race of Japan now, called us earth spiders as a derogatory term. The Japanese today tell of a monster that dwelled in Japan when they came to the islands. They still tell of this monster called Tsuchaigomo, which appears as a beautiful woman or fairy-like child. But its other form is that of a giant hairy spider with stripes. The legends say Tsuchaigomo would invite a man into their home, feed them, and then offer them shelter. The man would then fall ill, and the Tsuchaigomo in human form would continue to care for the victim as they grew weaker over days and weeks. In one account, the warrior awoke in a delirium, found himself in a room covered in thick web. He struck out, and wounding the monster, causing it to flee. He and his men followed the blood trail to the cave and discovered the body of the giant spider. In other tales, the Tsuchaigomo is spared and swore to serve the warrior and be bound till they have saved that warrior 3 times. The story often having the Tsuchaigomo traveling and battling in human form, killing other demons in order to keep the warrior safe. In one story, the Kitsune, who is a fox and man, seeing the Tsuchaigomo humbled by a human, agrees to also help, just for the enjoyment of watching a Tsuchaigomo service a human. But the Yahweh, or modern Japanese generally, hunted the Joman, or Tsuchaigomo people, as shape-shifting spider demons, until their numbers were greatly reduced. They finally bowed to the Emperor Kihiko and swore fealty to the Emperor. Somehow my family became a Japanese noble family and were assigned to be judges and protectors of the Emperor, till my grandfather passed the title to his younger brother. Of course, neither I nor my father turned into a spider or eat people, and my children were not told of our ancestral or the legends till my son started seeing things. It began when he was a toddler. He would wake up screaming and saying, "They're looking through my window. They're trying to get into the house." I assumed he was having night terrors, but when he was 9, he began seeing things more frequently in the yard. By this time, he was old enough to describe it better. He said it was all black with long arms and legs like a spider, but it was as big as a man and had a human torso. He couldn't see any facial features in the dark except that it was hairy. He saw its long spider-like arms come over the back brick wall and slide its body up and over till it was inside of the yard, still clinging to the wall. Then he'd begin to hear the whispering voice, but could not understand the words. What I didn't realize at the time was that his older brother and sister both had dreams in which they were approached by a spider-like creature with human face. They described it as having a human face, but the body was too long and the arms and legs looked like skinny insect arms. Of course, they were terrified to find out they were all seeing or dreaming of the same thing. I decided to tell them the legend of the Tsuchigomo, if only to ease their fear. I told them their ancestors had been hunted as spider demons, but that the indigenous Japanese hunted with poison-tip arrows, but were in fact peaceful and honored everything in nature, from the animals to the rocks and streams, even that which they ate. In traditional beliefs, our ancestors didn't just die and go away. They traveled back and forth watching over their family and protecting them. I have no proof that those ancestral legends are true, and I don't know if what my son saw had anything to do with those legends, but he sleeps well enough now. Another interesting fact, and perhaps ironic fact, is that Saint Xavier went to Japan. The first person in Japan to be converted to Christianity and be baptized was from our family, and subsequently 5 of his descendants were burned alive, rather than renounce their faith or turn into the Christian missionaries. If you look up Saint Leonardus or Sebastian Camara, the history of their martyrdom is still preserved. We have remained Christian since 1500s. The irony is that very people hunted as demons were the first to be baptized and die for their faith in Japan. I know it's not Dogman, but it's one of our shapeshifters. I wish you and your family a safe and peaceful night. Same sub, different email. Good evening, Jeff. I'm just gearing up and going on duty. Of course, I always listen to your show as I get ready. I'm an armed security contractor for the federal government, and one of my partners is also a prior military vet who served as an intelligence officer, and although we are both in the Navy, worked together for Homeland Security, and now as contractors, he only recently decided to tell me about an encounter he had several years ago. He is a man of few words, and will listen to your show with me sometimes without saying a word. A few months ago, after listening, he quietly said, "Why are white men seeing these things now?" He is Native American, explained that the tribes don't share most of their stories. A couple of weeks later, after another show, he slowly began to tell me his story. After he had finished his military service, he and his cousin were driving through tribal land, and they saw a deer on the side of the road. It was late and dark, but what caught his attention was its horn rack. He said it was massive, and as he looked at it, it began to stand up on hind legs and turned to watch them. He says him and his cousin uttered some profanities and sped by till they reached a gas station. He told the cashier he had seen something strange, and the cashier asked him to describe what he'd seen. When he did, the cashier told him that he had seen the devil. I'll need to ask him what else he was told about it and where exactly this took place. I'm not sure how he felt about me sharing his story, but I'll ask him for more details. I'll share my indigenous Japanese stories as with him as well, and that is often how we pass our shift. If he is willing to give more details and allows me to share his stories, I most certainly will. Thank you for your work on this channel, and I will continuously listen while I'm gearing up for work. Your encounters do help me get ready for duty. Tonight's 4th subscriber, Dogman submission. Jeff, I'd like to share my Dogman encounters with you. My name is Scott, and I'm from Scotland. I've had 3 Dogman encounters. Here's the first one. I was 15 years old, living in Grangemouth. It was the summer of 2014. My friend Ross and his family were going on vacation and did want to put their dog in a kennel. Did not want to put their dog in the kennel, so they asked me if I would take care of Rusty and walk him and make sure he had food and water. I said yeah, because I didn't have a dog and I wanted one. So one night, about 11 p.m., I'd go over and check on Rusty. We start walking to Palmount Woods, and on the way, I've got this really weird feeling like bad vibes. We get there, and I realize I forgot a light and my phone, but the moon is out, so I figure it'll be okay. Rusty starts smelling everything and peeing on every branch. We keep walking, he barks at something, and I think it's a squirrel. About 10 minutes into the walk, Rusty starts pulling on the leash and barking. The leash starts digging into my hand, and I accidentally let go of it. Crap, I say out loud, and call out to Rusty as he runs into the woods. I start to run after him, and about a mile into the woods, I realize that I'm lost. And I think Rusty is now gone. I hear the rustling of the woods and turn. There's a squirrel and turn back around, and there's Rusty. I grab his leash and realize he's in fight mode, growling, staring at the tree. I'm smelling this musky animal smell that makes me want to gag. I see this brown animal come from around a tree. I think it's just a dog. All of a sudden, this thing stands up on its hind legs. I was about 5 foot, and the tree at the time, and it was about 6.5 feet, slender but muscular, with a dog-like head, pale yellow soulless eyes. I'm frozen, scared. The creature then drops down to all fours and runs into the woods. I grab Rusty and take off, going the opposite direction, running faster than I ever have. I get to Ross's house and run to the sink and vomit. I locked all the doors and stayed up all night. The next day, I go to school and fall asleep in class. I had a nightmare, and I scream out loud. I get sent down to the nurse's office. Calm down. 2 years later, I go back to the nurse, and she asked me what had happened that day. It took me a second to realize what she was talking about, and I did tell her what happened. She looked at me and states, I believe you, because about 30 years, her husband saw the same thing in Palmount Woods while hunting. My second encounter happened when I was 17 years old, and I went to visit a friend, Andrew, in the west end of Glasgow. For his birthday, we had a beer and decided to go for a drive. I tell him my story and he laughs at me. So he stops at a club and we're hanging out talking. We decide not to stay. 20 minutes later, we start driving around the rural back roads. We park and start talking. I hear this thud sound, so I ask him if he heard that as well, and said no. We start looking around, and out at the field in front of us, all of a sudden, another thud. He hears it this time, and seconds after says, "What was that?" Looking out at the field and looked terrified, so I looked out, and there's this 7-foot canine-looking creature on its hind legs in the field in front of us. He instantly backs up, drives the hell out of there, and back to his house. My third encounter happened last year when I was 19 years old. My friend Ross calls me and says, "Come over and hang out. My girlfriend's out, so we'll watch some football, soccer for you Americans, and have some beers." So I show up and park behind his Ford Raptor and go in and watch TV for a couple of hours, and we hear this ungodly scream. We jump up and we're both like, "What was that?" Ross doesn't have neighbors, so he tells me to grab his 9mm pistol, and we go outside and look around and see nothing. We go back inside and hang out for about an hour. I go into the kitchen to get a glass of water. I look out the window and see this dog-like creature staring at me, standing on its hind legs. I let out this scream and Ross came out and said, "What was that?" I point and I say, "You tell me." The Dogman looks at us and blinks. Ross grabbed his rifle and we sit in the living room with each of us having a firearm. Time goes by and nothing. We look out the windows and see nothing, so I say I'm going home. Ross walks me out with his rifle, and standing there, 8 or 9 feet tall, is the Dogman. It lets out this scream and Ross shoots at it. I don't know if he hit it, but it dropped down onto all fours and ran into the woods. We both jumped in his truck and he drove me home. The next afternoon we go back and I'm terrified to get my car. And he says, imagine how I feel. I have to live there. Jeff, these are my encounters. Thank you for allowing me to share them. Peace. Tonight's final worldwide. Actually, this is the final worldwide subscriber submission. Next, I'll be jumping into maybe I'll do the non-read, because I have unread subscribers and I have undisclosed locations. Let's do the non-read ones next. But anyway, this final subscriber submission, I have a friend who he is Central American, and he has a friend, and we were talking about cryptids a while ago. This is like 2018, to be honest with you. And he talks about this creature named Tintin. And he has his friend email me and tell me all about Tintin and an encounter. So I thought this was so fascinating, and I hope you guys like it. Latin American cryptid, Tintin. This cryptid has been seen or heard in Latin America for ages. There are reported sightings of this creature from southern Mexico, Central America, and South America. It goes by names such as seismite in Guatemala, Coraparera in Brazil, Boraro in Colombia, and Tintin in Ecuador. While the specifics in his appearance vary from region to region, the common traits of the creature are backwards legs and feet, small in stature, usually under 5 feet, hairy, big eyes, long pointed ears. The males of the species have large penises that usually drag to the ground. Not joking, it's part of the legend. Some stories describe it more as an evil hairy dwarf rather than a Sasquatch-like creature. It lives in isolated areas away from populated urban areas. Some legends say it is nocturnal, but others say it is active during the day. Its MO is a predatory stalker. It likes young women, seduces women by the means of hypnosis. It is said to accomplish this by either whistling or singing. In those places that describe it more as an evil dwarf, he plays a guitar. While in trance, the creature kidnaps his victim and takes them to his lair, where he impregnates the woman. The women are eventually found wandering in a daze. The woman ends up pregnant, gives birth to a monstrous, half-human hybrid with backward legs. Many stories even tell that these children must be destroyed in a particular manner by impaling them into a cactus. On certain nights, after one of these children are disposed of, you can hear the creature wailing mournfully over its loss. This must be done or the creature will return and steal and abuse more women in the area in order to procreate. Some legends say that the creature will kidnap the hybrid children when it's born and raise it itself. The legends are all over the place on if and how it can be killed. Some say it's an immortal creature, while others claim to have killed it by conventional means, such as shooting it with a gun. Ecuadorian encounter of Tintin. This encounter was told to me back in November of 2014. I was visiting family in Ecuador, which is in South America. We were visiting the cousin of my mother's in a mountain area where they had their home. A friend of my mom's reminded my mom not to wander into the hills after dark because of the Tintin. My mother had told my brothers fairy tales about this creature when they were young. I laughed at this, but the gentleman in question told us not to dismiss this as an old wives' tale. He said the local authorities get lots of people turning up missing and down these local mountain villages under mysterious circumstances. They are never heard from again. He recounted a story from a supposed real encounter that happened, to the best of his recollection, in the late 80s. A girl named Rosa had gone home with a friend after school one afternoon after class had ended for the day. The friend lived in a nearby canyon area by a rural village school. They had spent the whole afternoon having a good time listening to music and talking about school and boys. Rosa had lost track of time and needed to get home to do her chores and help her mom prepare dinner for her dad, who would be getting home shortly after a long day at work. The sun was starting to set, and in a few short minutes it would be dark. Desperate not to get in trouble, she asked her friend if they knew a faster way to town. She pointed her to a dirt path away from the paved road. It was surrounded by dense forest. She warned her it was winding and steep path down the side of a hill and could get treacherous in the dark if she was not careful. She told her that when she got to the bottom there was a small stream that she could hop over to get to the village. In utter despair, Rosa chose to risk it. She had said goodbye to her friend and began to walk down. The trees and vegetation were very dense along this path, and you could not see too far ahead of you because of this. Things were made more difficult when the sun completely set. At times, she could see a faint light of a village far off in the distance. She started picking up pebbles on her shoe and stopped briefly. Her body began to feel heavy. In spite of the fact she knew she was terrified, she found herself unable to move. The creature emerged from the brush. It was a short, hairy beast. It only came up to her waist. It had a wide head and long, pointed ears that jutted from the side of its head. Most horrific of all was its feet. They were turned backwards. She somehow was able to scream, and this startled the creature, and it stopped whistling. She then, filled with fear, was able to run. As she ran down the remainder of the hill, she could hear its footsteps behind her. She also heard it laugh out loud in this high-pitched squeal. She got to the stream at the bottom of the hill and quickly jumped over it and ran to the outskirts of the village. She only turned once to see its glowing eyes. It was standing there just before the stream, watching her. She told her parents and the locals of what had happened. One version of the story claims that the creature had hypnotized her and tried to assault her. She only remembers escaping after she had been assaulted by this thing. She also says that she had gotten pregnant from this encounter, but disposed of the baby after giving birth to a half-human, half-demon child. She left the village shortly thereafter. Well, my friends and family, that finishes off the worldwide Dogman subscriber submissions. Wow, that went quicker than I thought. A pretty big envelope, or folder too. Oh well, we still got plenty more. I've got a whole folder of unread subscriber submissions, which I'm going to do that. I'm going to jump into that one. I got to jump on the line and go through my emails tonight and get some others that have been sent to me as well. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for all of your support. You guys are great. You keep this channel going. So, thank you very much. With that, I want to please encourage everyone to practice kindness. May the Great Spirit watch over us all. And may He guide us down that path that we call life. Until tomorrow, my friends. Nope. Until later on tonight, my friends, for the conspiracy side and more of Dulce.